So let's talk about the rolling blackout, stage 3 at the moment, by the way, until 4 o'clock this afternoon. Then we go back into stage 4 from 4 p.m. It's good fun, isn't it? Let's talk about how people are spending their money. BrandMapp has published the results of its SA Blackouts Report survey. I'm not going to give you all the numbers. That's why I've dragged in the BrandMapp Director of Storytelling, Brandon de Kock, who's always very kind with his time. Morning to you, Brandon. So let's talk first of all, if you don't mind, who is buying what to counter these blackouts? Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Gareth. Thanks for having me on. I think it's such an important piece of work that we did. You know, we're all guessing at the moment a little bit, I think, about how everybody else is affected. We all know we're affected, but we don't quite know by how much. So, as per usual, we went to market. You know, the people we're talking about here, just to make it clear, as always, it's the taxpayers, right? We research people living in households earning more than 10,000 Rand. So what's critical about everything I'm about to say is that it only applies to the segment of South African society who are sort of most able to respond, right? This is not the poorer, lower income households. These are the people who can afford it. And you know that the saddest thing we've discovered is that the single biggest thing that people have done to respond to load shedding is that 61% of people say they've bought candles. I mean, it's, you know, it's kind of frightening. It's like we've actually inadvertently been chucked back to sort of pre-First World War Victorian times to deal with the crisis. The way it looks to me, and it's brand new data, we only released the report last week. You can download it from our website if you want to read the whole thing. But it feels to me like there's about a 70-30 equation here, that about 30% of people have been able to do something meaningful, by which I mean, you know, buy an inverter like you were talking about, or if they possibly, a tiny number of people who can afford a full solar installation. But about 70% of middle class and up South Africa, it just doesn't seem to have been able to, or been willing to, or had the ready cash to make a meaningful response. So it's candles, USB lighting, you know, it's Band-Aids. It's not surgery. You know?
It's not. And how many people do you think, those who are able to respond, Brandon, say that it's actually increased their living costs each month? Because right now we're talking about solar, you're talking about UPSs quite rightly, but there are some who had gone and bought generators. But the problem is you have to run the generator, which means you have to buy the fuel, whether diesel or petrol, whatever it might be. You still have to pay for that, and that's an added cost, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we see it across the board, and obviously, you know, costs. Load shedding has increased people's cost of living. Simple as that. And what you're saying is correct. That you would expect it's the people at the top who are spending more because they've got more to spend on, like the generators up. But actually, it's the lower income people who've been most affected economically. For obvious reasons, it's a bigger share of a smaller wallet that's required to fight this thing. We see people, the youth, hectically impacted. Young people just getting started in life, suddenly they've got these extra expenses to try and deal with just everyday life and stay connected. And then the other big one we discovered was the entrepreneurial sector. They're the ones who've been massively impacted, not just in terms of what they've obviously had to spend to get the tech at home, or to get their some sort of consistency of power, but just the way it's affected their businesses, young people. So young people, business entrepreneurs, I mean, only the most important segments of our socio-economic framework, which is why, you know, it's hectic, yeah.
It is. And I can't help but wonder, when you're talking about those, it just suddenly made me think of those who are coming out of high school, maybe out of university, brand new entrepreneurs. It just got me thinking, Brandon, tell me if I'm on track here, that what you should be doing as a young entrepreneur is putting money away to invest in your company, whether it's through research, getting websites built, maybe hiring some low-level staff. But what you're doing now is taking 180,000 Rand, which you probably don't have as an entrepreneur, and having to put solar on your roof just to try and get a company going that actually isn't up and running yet. I mean, you understand the irony of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those sort of weird, it's the butterfly effect at play, right? There are these things that you assume, you know, are going to be reactions to or results of something like load shedding, but you don't imagine 10 years down the road what it's going to be like. So it's going to stall those people. Their businesses, their lives will be stalled. Same as we see the students. You know, there's this, one thing was that 60% of people, or more than half of people, said that being able to read and study was being badly affected by load shedding. They weren't able to do it. If you're sitting in the dark and you're reading books, it's hard. When we put a student filter on that number went up to 80%.
Wow.
So, we've got a student generation who are only just recovering from COVID and the effects of not being able to be on campus and enjoy like a student community life. And now suddenly they're all sitting at home in the dark and they literally can't read their textbooks. So the effects of this thing are going to be, it's very like COVID. It's going to be very drawn out, and it'll probably only be in a year or two that we see the effect of something like that. How badly. If you stall the SME sector in South Africa for a year, what is the midterm effect on that in terms of starting up new business and employment? Going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, it certainly is as well. Just as I say goodbye to you, Brandon, just briefly, I see on screen, we had it a moment ago, that there's a high percentage who are planning to still pay even more money to try and mitigate the blackouts. And I think it's because we've all realized we don't really have a choice in this. It's not going to go away soon. So the money we should be saving and investing and paying off debt, nope. Now we're buying things to keep the lights on.
Absolutely, and solar is the big one. Like 40% of everyone. I mean, I think a lot of people are realistic that solar is probably out of their reach financially, but those who can have got solar on their radar. And it definitely. I think you're right. I think the short-term solution here is we've got to look after ourselves, which we're very good at doing as South Africans, and looking after one another. I'm not sure how we're all going to solve this sort of together, but solar definitely seems to be the thing that's caught everybody's imagination. And living in a country where the sun shines sort of more often than it doesn't, so the sun shines a lot more often than the power's on at the moment. So it seems like that's the solution everybody's looking at. Yeah,
that's the solution. I think that anybody who has the money, and you're very lucky if you do, and they can do it as well. Maybe a discussion one day. We'll be talking to Brandon de Kock and some other experts in the sector about the cost of solar. Maybe it's just me, but I'm not seeing the cost of solar really coming down. I don't know. Maybe there's a question there for the Competition Commission. Brandon, thank you very much. Always good to talk to you. Brandon de Kock, BrandMapp Director of Storytelling.